decree in any given moment what is and is not acceptable speech.
All right, let's go ahead and cut to the crap. Let's talk about this in a metaphorical way. Has anybody out there seen the Rajah Jackson wrestling promo video out there? Put in Rajah Jackson wrestling on YouTube, you'll probably find it. Rajah Jackson is a trained MMA fighter and the son of Rampage Jackson, former MMA champion. He was visiting this former wrestler named Rikishi's independent wrestling promotion as a way of getting eyes on the promotion. And he's hanging out with the boys backstage, and one of them decides to greet him in a wrestler's fashion. You see, a pro wrestler by the name of Psycho Stu chooses to grab a hold of an open beer can and crush it on Rajah's head. Now, there's many different rituals that wrestlers use to welcome a person to the boys, and this is one of those styles of welcoming. You're showing that you're not going to hurt the person, that everything's going to be fine. That open beer can just squirted everywhere. No damage was caused to Rajah. And it was a way of saying, I'm going to do things to your body, but it's not going to hurt, and I will take care of you. That's the message being conveyed. That is not the message that Rajah received. You see, upon that beer can being crushed on his head, the people on Kick started to comment. They didn't have a proper reference for why Stu did that. And they said, are you going to let this man treat you like a female dog? Another word, but are you going to let the person treat you like that? Are you going to let him disrespect you like that? What are you doing? And Rajah began to express discontent of his own, saying that was not cool. And Stu, to his credit, realizes he stepped over the line and does attempt to apologize. And as a way of assuaging Rajah, the promotion says, well, why don't we use that as an angle? You'll get your receipt. You'll get one good punch in. You're going to change the match. You're going to make Stu look like an idiot for doing what he did, and it's going to cost him the match. That's not what happened. Well, allegedly, that's not what happened. And this gets into the difference between people who are casual viewers of the product and people who are hardcore Law and Order type of individuals. Rajah does roll into the ring. He double legs Stu, takes him down, and delivers a punch. And then another punch. And then 23 more punches, all to the head. And by all accounts, he's pulled off by the wrestlers, escorted from the building, and told to leave. Stu evidently ended up in the hospital, and Rajah walks down the street saying, no one's going to treat me like a female dog. Now, you might be sitting there saying, what does this have to do with UK free speech angles? I think it's an excellent metaphor. You see, currently, right now, evidently, the police are looking for Rajah for doing what's called a shoot. And this requires us to talk what is a work and what is a shoot. Stu had grabbed that beer can and smashed it on Rajah's head and then incorporated that into an angle in the show. That's known as a work. You're working with another individual to try to give a storyline out there that causes people to want to buy tickets, to actually watch your product, to put money in people's product, and you're working together. But when Rajah walked in and decided to go ahead and do his cranial pummeling, that's when it became a shoot. When a person has gone into business for himself or has a problem with the person in the ring and has gone outside the storyline and just done whatever the heck they want to do. And that can come with criminal penalties. So now let's talk about UK free speech laws. Currently, to my knowledge, there are 2 laws on the UK books governing online speech. Those 2 laws are the Online Safety Act of 2023 and the Malicious Communications Act, which goes all the way back to 1988. The problem is if you'll actually read these statutes, you find that they are left open to interpretation, open to individuals saying this is or is not malicious speech communicated over major lines. And the question then becomes, who is it that determines what is and is not malicious speech? Now, quick Google search. I'm VPN locked, so I'm not in the UK, but I did manage to find out that there's no singular governmental entity with strict guidelines about what does or does not violate free speech. Rather, these entities go out with general guidelines and try to interpret what is or is not a free speech violation. Now, you can see this in its application when you actually look into people that have been charged and the eventual outcry or lack of outcry upon their prosecution. 2 of the more understandable prosecutions were those of Tyler K. and Jordan Parler. Now, what made them perfectly understandable? Well, they had gone beyond actually calling for redress within the governmental system, had called for the burning down of structures that housed immigrants that are the central core of the issue of what's going on. People have seen individuals coming from certain regions of the world. They've expressed concern about the numbers of individuals in their country, and they want to talk about whether or not they support the continued influx of these individuals. These guys went a little bit beyond that and said, no, we don't need to just call out for redress in the government. We need to actually burn down the structures where these individuals are housed. And I think most of us can understand that if you're calling for violence against individuals rather than redress of your government, that's probably stepping over the line. Then there's the case of Lucy Connolly. Now, I was able to do some preliminary research on this. It turns out, from what I've gathered, at the time she made certain comments of bigotry online, saying she didn't appreciate a certain caste of people coming into her nation. However, if you do some research later on, she did make some similar responses as the gentleman before, saying that they should burn down structures where these individuals were housed. So there is a point where the government probably should have stepped in, but not necessarily at the point that they did. Keep that in mind. We're going to get back to Raja. Hold with me real quick. Then there's the video that the Ultivillain, the person I've stitched in this video, brought to the foray. A man had gone on Facebook and had expressed concerns over a certain group of people that he's seen large-scale influxing into his nation. Flags he's seen in his private neighborhood. Chants that he'd heard about a certain river and a certain sea. I'm sure you can figure out which group I'm referencing. And he said there must be a way to deal with this. From what I've been able to gather, he hadn't called for actions of violence. He hadn't called for exclusion beyond saying we should have a large number more come into the country. And yet he was charged. Let's bring this back to the Raja Jackson video. Going back to the wrestling incident, the crushing of the beer can on Raja's head, that eventually was made into a work. Think of that as discussing things with individuals, trying to work it out, trying to find redress within the system, talking it out, discussing things. Then Raja got into the ring and did what he did. That's individuals seeking to go beyond redress through their system, trying to work with the program, and taking things into their own hands. And finally, remember, he's being sought after by a legal authority for possible criminal prosecution. I think this ties in nicely. If you allow people to talk things out, to work within the system, to discuss the views they have on things, where the lines are, when you've offended someone, when you can seek to make things right, when you can actually come up with a storyline, something you both can work with, I think that's a perfectly acceptable way of using free speech, even if it comes with certain stereotypical applications or bigotry. And as we view those people, we can find the ones that are bigoted that we don't want to deal with, like individuals that want to burn down hotels or take violence actions like Raja did, completely going outside of the system, taking things into their own hands. And there is a time for those legal authorities to step in. However, my concern is where people want the authorities to step in and to what they want to apply that to. But it is to the extent that people want the authorities to step in. Do you want them to step in at a moment when a person like Raja wants to take matters into their own hands, step outside the system, not wait for any form of discussion or possible redress through Congress or the criminal justice system, and just take matters in your own hand? Of course, we all want those people taken down. But when you go to a person breaking the beer can over a person's head, trying to work within the system, relieving their anxieties and their angst, trying to work within the system, when you get to that point, there's going to be large-scale consequences, and we've already seen it in the UK. Recently, we've seen more and more demonstrations of individuals out there expressing discontent on what's going on in the UK when it comes specifically to immigration. Rather than listening to its people, listening to individuals trying to work within the system, we've instead started to see arrests for people just merely expressing what they see and their discontent within it. And when you get to a certain point, when the government is not listening, when they do not want to take your opinions into account, when you can't even express how you feel, it's going to lead to larger scale consequences. And my fear is we're going to see more and more Rajas in the UK theater. Be careful, ladies and gentlemen, for what you wish, because if you don't allow people to express themselves, it could have large scale consequences. The purpose of free speech is individuals expressing how they feel, what they think, and possible redresses for their anger. And when they are stifled, you will see them take larger and more extreme measures because they have nothing else to lose and there is no redress for how they feel. Allow people to speak, sort out the bigots, target the individuals that are violent, but let them speak. I'll talk to you next time. We talk about another thing I find interesting. I'm out.